Good morning, children. I hope you have seen the previous video of the Constitution chapter, and where I have discussed, I simply, discussed about the US Constitution, how it has been amended, and what were the procedures laid down by the Congress, right? There were many different options given to the Congress ministries, and if they want, they can adopt that amendment and they can go for it, right? And obviously, if you see that US Constitution is a very rigid constitution, right, and it cannot be amended very easily, right? So here this video is in continuation with that. Previous before In the previous video I already explained you about the British Constitution, how it can be easily amended, but still the steps are not that much easy, right? US Constitution, you all have now listen. Obviously it is a very rigid constitution. Here in this video I'm going to explain you about the Indian Constitution, how it can be amended, what are the procedures and methods, and what kind of constitution is this. I mean to say that what kind of strategy can be adopted in this type of constitution, right? So few parts of Indian Constitution we have already did in class 10th, if you remember, children. So this that key we are going to be, everything is to be explained in depth in this chapter, right? So let's start now. Now, if you remember, children, like Indian Constitution now, first of all, try to clear one thing, that Indian Constitution is a partly rigid and partly flexible, right? And here the method of amendment of the Constitution I'm going to explain, right? So it is a mixture of what class? The mixture of rigidity and flexibility, right, was devised to safeguard the basic provision of the Constitution. And why a partly rigid and a flexible Constitution? I mean, it is a balanced Constitution. If you want, you can amend it, and if unnecessary amendments cannot be done in the Constitution, right? Why they kept it rigid and flexible? Why? So that the Constitution makers wanted to safeguard the basic provisions of the Constitution from quick changes, and at the same time to provide an easy alteration, means changes of its less important aspects possible. That means if we want to alter the Constitution or change the Constitution, that means that needs to be of a specific provision. That means it's not like that if you want it, you are at power and the party implement or the party adopt the ways which they wanted to. No, it's not like that, right? So that's why Indian Constitution is a partly rigid and a partly flexible constitution, so that the government can save itself from the revolt also, right? Maybe few amendments is necessary so that they can upgrade themselves with the changing times. This I've already discussed in the previous videos, children. So let's start with how the Indian Constitution can be amended, right? Let's start now. Now, if you see method of amendment of the Indian Constitution, if you see, right, Article 368 lays down the two method of amendment, right? And if you remember, children, here the Article 368 which lays down two methods of amendment. Now, the very first of all, the power to amend the Constitution rests mainly with the Union Parliament. Always remember, class, the sole authority lies with the Parliament, and the Parliament can amend the Constitution, right? And most of the constitutional provisions can be amended only by it, like maximum constitution provisions can be amended by it, right? Now, there are three basic ways in which amendments can be made. Now, stay alert, children, how these ways can be implemented. Now, the very first method was what, class? Is what actually? Most of the provisions can be amended by Parliament by passing of an amending act by a majority of total membership and 2/3 majority of member present and voting in each house, children, right? Then, next, article, part, chapter, schedule of the Constitution can be amended first by passing the amendment bill in accordance with a specified procedure, right, and then getting it ratified by at least half of the several state legislature. That means they wanted the approval of states also. Ratified here means signatures. Several specified constitutional provisions can be amended by the Parliament by passing an ordinary law by a simple majority. That means, I hope so, children, you people have understood, like by 2/3 majority of member present and voting, the first method. The next method, ratification by at least half of the several state legislature, that means the states. The third one, the Parliament can pass an ordinary law by a simple majority, right? And then at the last, what is the what is the procedure? Then at last, presidential signatures are required as a final act which transforms a duly enacted amendment bill into an amendment act. That means everyone knows, children, like I've already explained you in class 10, that the law needs to be ratified, needs to be signed by the president to become an act, right? So this is a whole procedure, right, children? Okay, come on to next slide now. Okay, so we are in continuation with that. Presidential signatures are required. He has no power to reject the duly passed amendment bill, right? An amendment bill can be introduced in either house of the parliament, right? Amendment bill, like whatever the bill they want to amend, can be introduced in either house of the parliament. It does not require the prior approval of the president. Clear? Next, if you see, state legislatures have been denied the power to initiate amendments. Children, one thing is cleared over here, like if they want to take the initiative, if the states legislatures wanted to take the initiative and they wanted to amend the constitution first, they cannot do it. It is totally prohibited in the constitution, right? And who can take the initiative in amending the constitution? Solely the initiative lies solely with the parliament, right? Next, if you see, all amendments are subject to the judicial review power of the judiciary. Children, I've already explained you in class 10 what do you mean by judicial review. Here Supreme Court has the power of reviewing the laws, right, made given by the constitution. And what Supreme Court reviews? Supreme Court reviews the legislative bodies and executive bodies, whether they are following the rules and regulations given in the constitution or not. And if they are not following, the Supreme Court can declare it null and void. Right, children, if you remember. Next, if you see, the parliament can override or modify any part of any amendment. It can enact amendment for bypassing the judgment of the Supreme Court. However, even such amendments are subject to the judicial review power of the Supreme Court. The parliament has the power to amend each and every part of the constitution. There are no unamendable part of the Indian constitution. However, Supreme Court has ruled that the parliament has no power to change the basic structure of the constitution. But parliament cannot change the basic structure of the constitution. Clear, children? So I hope so people have understood how the amendment can take place. Now, before coming on to the limitations, children, here if you want, I can the explanation of the two methods of amendment laid down by Article 368, right? So if you see if I am coming back to the first method of the amendment, right? So here the amendment by 2/3 majority in each of the two houses of the parliament, the very first method, if you see here, Article 368 of the constitution lays down that amendment of the constitution may be initiated only by the introduction of a bill for the purpose in either house of parliament, and when the bill is passed in each house by a majority of the total membership of that house and by a majority of not less than 2/3 of the member of that house present and voting, it shall be presented to the president, who shall give his assent to the bill, and thereupon the constitution shall stand amended in accordance with terms of the bill. Right, children? I hope so people have understood. That means, in simple word, we can say that under this method, most of the constitution can be amended by the union parliament alone. For this purpose, an amendment bill has to be passed by each of the two houses by a majority of its total membership and by a 2/3 majority of members present and voting. It is a rigid method in so far as it prescribes a special majority for amending the constitution. Right, now come on to second method. Now second method, amendment by 2/3 majority in both houses of the parliament and ratification by at least half of the several state legislature. Now it means, in respect of some key features of the constitution, now a rigid method of amendment has been prescribed in respect of some provisions as specified in Article 368 itself. The amendment making involved two stages in this. Now first, the passing of the amendment bill by both the houses of the union parliament or by a majority of total membership and a 2/3 majority of members present and voting in each house. Second, the amendment bill as passed by the parliament becomes an act only after it secures ratification from at least half of the several state legislature and the assent of the president. Right, and if you remember class, now the following provisions of the constitution can be amended, children. Now the time for the example, children. What are the provisions that can be amended now? So what are the provisions now? Now if you see, elections of the president, given in Article 54 and 55, it can be amended. Extent of the executive power of the union, given in Article 73. Extent of the executive power of the state, given in Article 162. Then provisions regarding High Court in Union Territory, provisions regarding Supreme Court of India, provision regarding High Courts in state, legislative relations between the Union and state, any of the list, right, and provisions regarding the representation of states in the parliament. All these, provisions can be amended. Right, children? Now come on to the third stage, amendment by simple majority of vote in both the houses of parliament. Now, constitution empower the parliament to amend, change some specified constitutional provisions. The parliament can amend these by ordinary lawmaking. For amending this, a bill can be introduced in either house of parliament, which becomes a law when passed by both the houses individually by simple majority of their members present and voting. Right. Now, here in this case, and obviously signed by the President of India, the following provisions of the Constitution can be amended by this flexible method now. Now, if you see Article 2, 3, and 4 providing for admission or establishment of new state, formation of new state, and alteration of areas, boundaries, or names of existing states, and laws made, right? All these provisions of the Constitution can be amended, right? Then if they are if they want Article 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 dealing with citizenship of India, then dealing with delimitation of constituency, then other articles relating to quorum in parliament, then privileges of the member of the parliament, then fixing of salaries and allowances of the member of parliament, then the rules of procedure in each house of parliament, then English as the language of the parliament, the appointment of judges in the Supreme Court, then the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, the creation or abolition of an upper chamber in a state, the legislature of union territory, the elections in the country, the official languages of India, right? So all these, in these three methods, all these provisions of the Constitution can be amended. All these I'm giving the example, don't get confused children, I'm just giving you the example, right? So now let's move on to another slide now. So salient features we have already discussed now. Next, now limitations of the method of amendment now. So what are the limitations of method of amendment now? The very first thing is that undemocratic in nature. Since the process of amendment does not provide for a popular referendum, it is undemocratic. The people have been denied any role in amendment of their constitution. The very minus point of this type of amendment done in the constitution is that people have a lesser role, right? Next, very flexible. The parliament has the power to amend most of the constitutional provisions either by simple majority or by a two-third majority, along with a majority of total membership, right? So the flexibility of the constitution is evident from the fact that within 68 years of its operation, 102 amendments have been made to it, children, if you see. Next, now, very rigid. However, some scholars, few scholars, feel that constitution should have prescribed an easier method of amendment. In the past, the constitution worked as a flexible constitution because of the single party dominance that operated in India. Now, if you see, the process of amendment making has become a difficult exercise. Now it has turned the amending process into a rigid system which prevent the constitution from acting as an instrument of desired social change. Next, lack of procedure for resolving deadlocks over amendment bill. The constitution provides for the joint sitting method of resolving deadlock between the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha over ordinary measures for lawmaking. However, it does not provide for a system for resolving deadlocks between the two houses over amendment bill. Right. If you remember, children, class 10th, who is solving the deadlock? President, right? And the speaker. Next, if you see less importance to a state, except for the 10 exceptions listed by Article 368, all parts of the Constitution can be amended by Parliament, right, without the consent of the state legislature. So this is the minus point. Parliament alone can do maximum amendment, children. Next, no time limit for ratification by a state, even in respect of the amendment for which the Constitution makes the consent of at least half of the state legislature is essential. No time limit within which the state are to take their decision stands prescribed. Right. Next, consent of the president is necessary. Right, the provision for presidential assent at the final stage of amendment making is unnecessary. The provision is not only superfluous but also tends to make the indirectly elected president more important than the directly elected representatives of the people. Right, now if you see the provisions for judicial review or amendment, the system of judicial review of an amendment which stands duly passed under Article 368 is unnecessary. This makes the Supreme Court of India third chamber of legislature with superior and negative power of rejecting and as unconstitutional a duly enacted amendment of the Constitution. Then next, if you see too many amendments, the critics hold that already a large number of amendments have been made in the Constitution. And if you see till today the Constitution has been amended 102 times. So several amendment bills are still in the process of becoming parts of the Constitution. So on all these grounds, the critics strongly criticize the method of amendment of the Constitution of India. Children, don't get confused. These are the limitations on the Constitution of India. These are the minus areas, the minus point of the amendment of the Constitution. Right. So if you say it can be said that it is best possible, if not the best system. Right? This constitution has both the elements of rigidity as well as the flexibility. In a developing country like India, the constitution is an instrument of social change, and that is why it has undergone frequent amendments. The detailed and lengthy size of the constitution and its character as a common constitution for both the union and the states have also been responsible for the incorporation of several frequent amendments. Right, children? So I hope so people have understood till here now we are reaching to the last part of the video, children. So I hope so people have understood by now how the amendments have been taken place, right, in case of British Constitution, in case of American Constitution, in case of Indian Constitution, right? And all these are, children, all these constitution are in your syllabus, so you have to be very careful regarding this, right, children? So pay attention, listen to the videos and complete your assignments. Till then, thank you.